Make sure, because I'm looking around here, Flavian, let's just make sure that people understand. This is 6 different finishes. What do you smell? Well, you can smell sometimes the polyphenol of the woods, and sometimes people say, I'm getting a little bit of smoke. It's nothing to do with the smoke of the barley. This, in fact, is the polyphenols, the aging of the wood. Now, as you see, you just put it together. There we are. Look at the smoke. Now, this is what's burning. This is what you smell with Islay whiskies. But when it comes to Dalmore, look at it. You smell it? No, that's not what you're smelling here. This is all to do with the maturation. So I want you to not think of peat as you cut from the land. Remember, Scotland, 10% of the land is from the peat, the smoke, the peaty smoke. You can smell it in the aroma in the room. It's going on and on. Smell that there. But it's not going to be...
But that's not it, because we're not talking about peat with Dalmore.
Not at all. Not at all.
So those smoky notes, it's important because quite often we get smoky notes, but we know there's no peat at the base. So that's during the maturation.
Correct. From the maturation. Now this is 40%. But what I want you to do with this one, like I did with a great film crew down in New Orleans, I want you to really hold this long in the mouth. Now I know we can't do it for this length of time, but I'm talking about at least 1 minute to 2 minutes. Because when you put it in the mouth and extract these flavors, 40%, you're really going to see it. Well, here we go, one more time.
It's too good for me. I had to swallow.
And bring it down. Spicy, chocolate, marmalade, everything comes together.
That is rich. That is
See
rich.
the richness of it?
But nothing aggressive, nothing
No.
that hurts in any way.
Very, very soft. And remember, these are just some of the core range of Dalmore. But of course, since October 2006, we have been introducing only a handful of whiskies in the world do this now. We've introduced the 40-year-old, the 45 years old, the 50 years old, the 62, and more recently, last year, the 64 years old Trinitas, now $175,000 for one bottle.
Wow. All right, well, just wait a minute. I thought that, say, after 25, 30 years, single malt Scotch could not go any further and better up.
Don't ever say that to me again.
All right.
Because when we talk about 25, sometimes that is just the beginning. Many people, the marketing people for 12 years old in the American market and worldwide said 12 years old, probably reached the peak. 25, as you said. But if you take the right casks, the right spirit, it can go on and on and on
But then,
and on.
what is it then? What is the right cask? How do you know? Do you just keep on tasting and smell? So you just go from a warehouse to another and you get some with that whiskey thief out of the barrel and what is it? You smell only, or do you taste as well?
We do everything. Flavian, look around here. There's so many different individual spirits here. So what you've got to do is to go out into the world. You take the casks, you think it might react, and you mature it, you test it, you mature it, you test it, and see how the whiskey will react. Like that Dalmore 64 years old, I matured it, and it took me 15 years, probably about 8 different casks to make sure it gave it that flavor, that style. But you have to make sure it's compatible with. I go to a bar, and then suddenly ask for a whiskey.
You go to bars?
And then suddenly, clonk, 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 all this bloody ice in it. What does it do? It's like, take Flavian, I rip his clothes off, he's bollock naked, I take him back to Scotland where the temperature is slightly lower, and he gets a fright. It's the same with the whiskey. Look at it.
And yet excited.
All this ice is giving it a fright. In the olden days, when there was no ice, the Scots went to the riverbeds, they took the cold rocks, they've been chilled by the mountain snows, that chilled it.
It's going to end up on the carpet, I know it.
And that's what happens. Well, I'm not going to do this today.
Oh, thank you.
But really what it does, look at that ice, it's absolutely frozen it. It's just ruined.
So we're just losing the aromas and the taste.
Correct. That's taken so many years. As you've tasted many whiskies over the years, all these years are suddenly neutralized. They're suddenly frozen in time. And that's what the ice does. So please, and even when you pick up the ice, you've got to say to yourself, have you smelled the ice? Does it smell clean, clear, or does it smell of bacon, pasta? You've got to look at the ice in the proper way. Is it the right ice? Has it been treated properly? When you come to a bar like the Brandy House, it doesn't need it. The Brandy Library does not look for ice. It looks for neutrality, nature at its best. Don't ruin it with ice.
Unless you've got pig's nose handy. Now, just wait a second. Our viewers need to hear secrets being revealed.
All right.
I want to know one thing. It's a question I've meant to ask, but I'm always afraid to ask this question. Now, you know, in cognac, and I'm sure you appreciate cognac. In cognac, when you're making a great blend,
yes,
you need the help of some boisé, some sort of an extract.
Right.
Some little, just maybe a gallon or two or more that's been, well, in a cask for a while.
Yeah.
And it picked up a lot of the wood extractives.
Yes.
All right. That's going to be a concentration of aging.
Yes.
Is that happening in Scotland? And why and why wouldn't it be happening in Scotland?
In Scotland, when we talk about sherry, remember when it leaves for Reth de la Frontera, I leave with 5 litres. When it arrives in Scotland, that 5 litres is probably down to about 3 litres. The rest is impregnated in the wood. When it arrives in Scotland, we have to, by law, pour the rest out completely in that cask. You're not allowed to add. You're not allowed to add, by law, anything to Scotch whisky. It has to be derived from the wood. And that's why we're not allowed to add anything. It's nature at its very best. Yes, we get extractives from the wood, but what you've got to be very careful about more than anything is making sure that it doesn't dominate it. My job as master blender is to make sure that we distill the product, but it shows the naturalness, the character, the natural character of Dalmore. We mustn't enhance it in any way. It's a contribution towards the wood. And when we talk about the 6 different finishes, the port, Madeira, Marsala, Cabernet Sauvignon, small batch bourbon and sherry, these are just giving enhancements, but it mustn't dominate it. It must. Blended whiskey still accounts for 92% of the whiskey market. So all the blended whiskies like White and Mackay, the 12 years old, the 13, all these whiskies, 19, 22 to the 30 to the 40-year-old blended whiskies, I'm responsible for that, along with Jura, Tamnavulin, Fettercairn, and obviously the Dalmore. Every spirit that we produce in our company, I'm responsible for.
And you tell me that with all of this, you still have time to write this. Now, this is a fantastic book. You have to look at it. You have to buy it. And you will understand really the science of what takes the blending, putting A, B, C, and D together, and it's going to make just a new letter in the alphabet. Something that will showcase what's best in all of those, but why and how. And it will tell you how you're supposed to enjoy it. Not that there's one rule. It really depends on what your take on it is, but goodness knows would definitely be right there, say by the bed, and next to maybe a glass of Dalmore.
I hope so.
If you have to have a scotch,
yes,
right there,
yes,
right next to you, when you're about to fall asleep,
yes,
which one would that be?
Oh, you've got to be, it's like Madame Bollinger. She always used to say, when do you drink champagne? When I'm happy, when I'm sad, when I share friends, when I'm in a bit of a disappointment mood, what have you. It's all a matter of taste and getting it right. But, there's so many great whiskies. Let me just tell you, when you look at this book, I look at it with great pride, but it took me 4.5 years to produce it. But I have to say, one thing that's not mentioned in this book is, in fact, the Shackleton single malt that I've just been involved with it. Remember Ernest Shackleton? I'm sure you're aware of. He went to the Antarctica in 1907. We gave him 25 cases of the McKinley's malt, and he got, of course, within 97 miles in 1909. He went back to his hut after achieving that great accolade, and he went back to England. And of course, Little did we know, but he left 3 cases behind, and it remained there until 2007. It had been in the ice for over 103 years. We were not able to extract it until last year, until February 2010. We've taken these 3 bottles back to Scotland. We've analysed it because they only released it through the Antarctic Heritage Trust to see the research. What was the whiskey like 103 years in comparison to the whiskey today? And I'm very proud to say that this is the whiskey here. This is it. This is the actual whiskey taken from the actual bottle. You'll see it was clear. It was produced at the Dalmore distillery, established in 1892. And it was a number of single malts from that distillery in Inverness. Sadly, it was closed down. And what I've done is I've replicated it. So the Shackleton malt of blends of single malts will be coming into the American market very shortly. It's already here in some areas, but this is a unique. This is really to remember what was produced in the 19th century, but more importantly, the memory of Sir Ernest Shackleton.
And that brings me, I guess, to my last question. In your job, how much of it is of that intuition, of what that wonderful nose brings to your brain? How does it translate? But how much of it is science? How much of it is gas chromatography analysis? How much of it is lab analysis?
Right.
How do you, because you've got to be getting to science when
Yes.
you need to replicate
Yes.
such a thing.
This is a very good question. What I would say to you is it is about back to the nose, the character, how you intuition. But what you need to do nowadays is you need to produce it, but you need backup of science to show and to prove that you're within that mark. And only science, only analysis will actually give it to you. That's why we had to have science to say how much peat was in here. This was 3.5 phenolics. What was the strength? 47.3. Was it American white oak? Was it sherry? Only analysis could do that. So it's a combination. Yes, intuition, my father, my grandfather, what's inherited in me, but we have to use science to back up what we've got today.
And so what was the oak?
This was American white oak with a little bit of sherry. It was a combination of both, using whiskies from 6 years old up to 20 years old, although I've in fact gone beyond that.
So already so far back, all the elements of great blending that, as we know it today, were present.
Great answer, because that's what it was. Many people think that my grandfather and my father, but particularly my grandfather, didn't really know what they were doing. They knew perfectly what they were doing, because they gave Ernest Shackleton a whiskey at 47.3. Why? Because when he went to the Antarctic, when he suffered these horrible, horrendous temperatures, low temperatures, what did the whiskey do? It didn't freeze. You didn't need to freeze this until about minus 40 before it was completely frozen. That means when the whiskey was there for 103 years, it wasn't frozen in time. It was still liquid, and therefore it preserved it. So when we brought it chilled, and then we slowly opened it by a syringe. You're not just opening it, you have to preserve the packaging in every way. When we took the needle and extracted it, put it in the glass, smelt it the first time, soft, elegant, refined, floral notes, buttery notes, honey, almonds, a little bit of spice, and then that whisper of peat, which we thought was going to be there, came towards the end. Can we taste it? No problem at all. Did we like it? Absolutely.
Well, hopefully it didn't just stay there. Hopefully this whiskey warmed him up back then, and you'll have it very soon in New York for a bit more of a housewarming party maybe. Thanks a lot.
Slanjiva.
Slanjiva.